In this video, I'll reveal the traps many of us fall prey to that stop us from saving money and building wealth. If you're working hard to try and save for your financial future, but you still find yourself living from paycheck to paycheck, then you're not alone. A third of UK workers are living month to month without any spare cash for emergencies or shocks, with a quarter struggling financially according to WTW's financial wellbeing study of over 4,000 UK employees. So how can we increase our ability to save money and grow our wealth, given just how hard times are right now? Well, a first step would be to try and identify any bad money management habits that might be holding us back. So in this video, I'm going to list 5 traps that we can all fall prey to when handling our money. By being aware of these traps, we can get better at avoiding them, and so more able to start putting money aside to help us grow our wealth and secure our future for our families. So let's dive in. Not tracking your disposable income. So you're being good and calculated all your fixed expenses like rent, childcare, utility bills and so on, and what's left is your disposable income. The pot of money you can freely spend throughout the month on things like eating out, buying gifts for yourself or others, cinema trips, clothes and so on. If you're like I used to be, you probably only keep a loose track of your disposable income spend, and when you get to the end of the month, you might find you've overspent. So now you're going to have to use some of next month's disposable income to make up for the overspend. If this happens a few months in a row, before you know it, most, if not all of your disposable income will end up being used to pay off the overspend from previous months. So we really do need to keep track of this spending to avoid falling into this trap. But there's another equally important reason why we should track our spending in this area. You see, this is where we can really optimize our spending, which in turn will allow us to free up some cash to put away savings each month, however small that might be. For many people, this might be the only part of their income where they can carve out some savings. So it really is key to unlocking a savings safety net. But if we don't get this under control, then it becomes all too easy to fall into the next trap: owing next month's paycheck. So imagine I've overspent my disposable income this month. Well, what do I do? Well, if I don't have any savings, then the only thing I can do is really to wait till my next paycheck comes along and use that to pay off the overspend. So now I owe some of next month's pay to the expenses of this month. This trap can easily lead me into more trouble for 2 reasons. 1, it can leave me vulnerable to unexpected expenses like an urgent car repair or a medical cost. Number 2, once this happens, it increases the chances it will happen again the next month, because I'll have less disposable income to hand. So I'll have to try hard to cut back a bit, or I'll end up overspending again, and so on until I end up in a debt spiral. This naturally leads to the next trap: using bad credit. When we don't have enough spare cash to cover our monthly costs, either because of an urgent expense or because our disposable income has been eaten up by previous month's overspend, we can easily find ourselves in trouble, and we might then consider using credit to help us get through the month. But using credit to cover our monthly costs is a bad move. Unless we can pay off the credit within the month, we'll start to accumulate interest, increasing the burden on ourselves. And if we couldn't cover our monthly costs, we're not going to be able to cover the same amount plus interest within that same month. We may need to borrow more credit next month, and so on and so on. And that's all it takes to get into a debt spiral. So at this point, I'd suggest the person in this situation go talk to their bank, consolidate their debt and work out a sensible plan to pay it off. People who need to use bad credit are often making the next mistake: paying yourself last. Avoiding this trap is probably the simplest thing we can do to improve our financial position over time. By itself, it'll greatly reduce the chance of ever falling into the previous 2 traps, but let's take a look at what it means. Paying yourself last happens when we take the view that at the end of the month, we'll save whatever's left of our disposable income. This is doomed to fail, and yet so many of us do it. I know, for example, that I often feel unsure just how much money I might need to get through the month. So I better just keep my money to hand. And if there's anything left over at the end of the month, then, I'll save it then. But of course, there's rarely anything left at all. Now, if we have no savings because we never keep track of our disposable income, and if we then overspend or have an unexpected expense, we're headed down the path to needing to use bad credit. We need to flip this around and instead pay ourselves first. When our paycheck arrives, we need to have a standing order already set up that transfers a set amount out of our income and into our savings account. This automatically pulls the money into our savings, and we no longer have to agonize if we should keep it to hand or not. I know from experience that once this system is set up, I often forget I even have the money and I don't miss it. Not only is this an efficient way to save, it's also sound money management because we're automating the process and taking emotions out of the equation. The more we can automate things in money matters, the better. Doing this each month, we should very soon be able to build up a financial cushion for ourselves that with luck will see us through any unexpected expenses and might even allow us in time to think about putting some of our savings away for longer at a better interest rate, or perhaps even investing. Now for the final and by far the most important trap that so many people fall into. It's so common and yet most of us don't even recognize we're in it. But once it's explained to us, understanding it can completely change the way we look at work, our time, and what we spend our money on. But before we get to that, if you've enjoyed this video so far, please consider clicking the like button and please press subscribe. It will certainly help me to continue to make videos like this and grow the channel. Thank you. So let's carry on. Trap number 5 is not understanding assets and liabilities. As I said, so many of us fall into this trap, but it's a trap really of ignorance, of not understanding something so basic and fundamental, and I'm constantly amazed we aren't taught about this in school. Once we do understand it, our view on money and ourselves might fundamentally change. All of us have the ability to trade our time for money. It's called being an employee. In this sense, our time is our first and most precious asset. So what's an asset? Well, an asset is something that generates value, most often in the form of money, and it's something that puts money into your pocket. In this way, then, your time is an asset because you can trade it for money. The trouble is we only have so much time. It's probably our most precious commodity. Once it's gone, it's gone. And so trading our time for money is a poor deal indeed. This is what makes people the world over miserable every day when they wake up and face another day at work. We know that fundamentally, time spent working is time spent away from doing things we love and cherish, by spending time with our family and loved ones. And if you're one of the lucky ones who love their work, then congratulations. You're in a very lucky position indeed. But for the rest of us, work is mostly a means to an end. So what do we do to cheer ourselves up after a 40-hour work week? We spend our hard-earned money on the things we want and need. And many of these things can be classed as liabilities. Whereas assets put money in our pockets, liabilities take money from our pockets. An example of a liability would be my car. First of all, I need to buy it or finance it, and then it takes money to fill it up with petrol, then I have to pay for road tax and insurance, and on top of that, the car will only decrease in value as soon as I've paid for it. The liabilities are those things that decrease our bank balance, because they cost money to buy and maintain. But what's worse, the more liabilities we buy, the more of our precious time we need to trade to replace the money we use to pay for them. This is the trap that many of us are in, but haven't recognized it because we haven't been taught to think like this. So what can we do? Well, we need to stop buying so many liabilities and instead buy or create more assets. But what assets could we buy? Well, one kind of asset we could buy is property. But in reality, only property we regularly get rental income from is an asset. The house we live in is really a liability. Yes, it can increase in value over time, but it's pretty inaccessible until we sell it. And in the meantime, it will be taking a lot of money out of our pockets in mortgage payments, maintenance costs, heating and utility costs, and so on. The other kind of asset we could buy or create is a business. The more successful the business is, the more money it generates. They are, in that sense, assets. But creating a business is hard work and full of risk. Before it can become an asset, it has to go through a painful birthing process of building up the business, keeping everything running in a very competitive marketplace, during which time it's more akin to being a liability, eating up our time and money. Starting a business is not for the faint-hearted. So we could buy a business instead, but that is expensive, and most of us couldn't afford to buy a business outright. So what's left? Well, if buying a whole business is too expensive, we could instead buy just a tiny little bit of it. This helps the owners, as we give them some of our money, and in return they give us a small share of their business with value equal to the amount of money we paid. If the business does well, then our share increases in value. If the business does poorly, then our share decreases in value. But what this means is that instead of only earning money through the sacrifice of our own time, our base asset, we can earn money from other assets, our stocks or shares, which can generate an income for us without the need for us to give up our time. This is called having a passive income, as it doesn't need us to be actively engaged to earn it. And a passive income is a very desirable thing indeed, because if it becomes big enough, it can free us up from having to work at all. Or at the very least, it can supplement our income and make us less dependent on our job, and so might allow us to move into less demanding work. A passive income can give us the space and freedom to decide what to do with our most precious of assets, time. So knowing this, we need to think really hard about how we spend our disposable income. Do we really need to buy another liability with our hard-earned money, only then to have to trade our precious time to get it back? Or do we want to use that money to buy assets that, with a bit of luck and time, will begin to work for us, increasing our wealth and perhaps one day freeing us from the need to work at all? So now you know about each of the 5 traps. Keep them in mind over the next few months and see how knowing about them changes how you think about your work, time and money. You might also want to check out my other video about setting up a junior stocks and shares ISA for your children to help teach them about assets and also set them on the path to financial freedom.